Everyone remembers that Eve ate first. Almost no one talks about the man who blamed her when God asked what happened. And this is where the simple version starts to crack. The story is usually told very quickly. There was a serpent. There was a fruit. There was a woman who was deceived. There was a man who ate too. Then paradise was lost. Clean, simple, easy to remember, also incomplete, because the problem did not end with the fruit. It continued with the answer. Adam was not only a man who disobeyed, he was also a man who, when the truth arrived, tried to move the blame away from himself. That changes the whole scene. Before the fall, Adam and Eve lived in a garden with no hunger, no rent, no traffic, and apparently no reason to ruin anything. They had one command. One, do not eat from that tree. Naturally, that became the tree everyone wanted to discuss. The serpent spoke to Eve. Eve looked at the fruit. The fruit looked desirable. She took it and ate. Then she gave some to Adam, who was with her, and Adam ate. He was not across the garden building a fence. He was not taking a nap under a distant palm tree. He was there. He saw, he received, he ate. That matters, because the story is often simplified until Adam almost becomes a confused bystander who somehow wandered into the wrong snack. But Adam participated. He heard the command before the serpent ever appeared. He knew what the tree meant. He made the decision anyway. It was like joining a bad plan, enjoying the moment, watching everything collapse and later acting as if the person beside him had filled out all the paperwork alone. The fruit was eaten. The command was broken. And suddenly the world felt different. Their eyes were opened, but not in the glorious way the serpent had suggested. There was no grand promotion, no secret wisdom ceremony, no glowing crown of knowledge. There was shame. There was fear. There were leaves. That was the first result of humanity reaching for forbidden wisdom. Emergency gardening. Adam and Eve covered themselves because something inside them had changed. Innocence was gone. Trust had cracked. The garden was still beautiful, but they no longer felt safe inside it. And Adam's next move would reveal even more than the bite itself, because a person's failure is not seen only in the moment of the mistake. It is also seen in what happens when the mistake can no longer be hidden. The real test was no longer whether Adam had eaten. That was already settled. The real test was what he would do when the footsteps came. The question was asked, and there was nowhere left to place the truth except directly in front of himself. Adam had eaten. But the fruit was not yet the end of the fall. The fruit was not yet the end of the fall. The fall became more visible when Adam hid. The moment after the bite mattered almost as much as the bite itself, because Adam's first response was not confession. It was concealment. Before the blame came desire, then disobedience, then shame, then fear, then a hiding place. Adam and Eve heard God moving through the garden, and instead of stepping forward, Adam disappeared among the trees. This was not a very strong strategy. The garden belonged to God. The trees belonged to God. Adam belonged to God. But apparently hiding behind some branches seemed worth trying. It was the ancient version of breaking something in the house, hearing footsteps in the hallway, and suddenly becoming deeply interested in standing very still behind a curtain. Adam knew something had changed. Before the fruit, God's presence meant safety. After the fruit, the same presence felt threatening. God had not become different. Adam had. That was the crack. The command had been broken, but now the relationship was breaking too. Adam no longer approached openly. He covered himself, withdrew, and tried to avoid the one who already knew where he was. Because disobedience rarely arrives alone. It brings explanations, it brings fear. It brings the sudden belief that hiding the damage is somehow easier than facing it. Adam had made a decision, but now he wanted distance from its consequences. And this is where the story becomes painfully familiar. People often spend more energy managing the appearance of an error than repairing the error itself. They delete the message, change the subject, avoid the conversation, prepare the excuse. Adam had leaves and trees, but the instinct was the same. The problem was no longer only that he had done something wrong. The problem was that the wrong thing was now trying to survive without responsibility. Then God called to him. "Where are you?" It was not because God had lost track of Adam somewhere between the fig trees. This was not a search party. The question gave Adam a chance to come forward. Adam answered, but even then, he did not begin with the real issue. He spoke about fear, he spoke about nakedness, he spoke about hiding. All of those things were true. None of them were the whole truth. God then asked how Adam knew he was naked. The hiding place had failed. The leaves had failed. The careful answer had failed. The conversation was moving directly toward the tree, and Adam could no longer remain a frightened figure behind the branches. He would have to explain what he had done. This was the moment when the fall would stop looking like a private mistake. It would become a spoken defense. Adam had eaten. Adam had hidden. And now came the question no one could avoid. And now came the question no one could avoid. God asked Adam whether he had eaten from the tree. It was direct. No mystery. No complicated wording. No room for a 20-minute presentation about context. Adam could have answered with 2 words. I ate. Instead, he turned the answer sideways. The woman you gave to be with me. She gave me fruit from the tree and I ate. There it was. The woman, the gift, the fruit. And then, almost hidden at the end, Adam's own action. He did admit that he ate, but only after arranging the sentence so that everyone else entered the story first. This was no longer only disobedience. This was blame being transferred. Adam did not simply explain what happened. He built a defense around himself. Eve gave him the fruit. God gave him Eve. Therefore, Adam seemed to suggest perhaps the real problem had arrived from somewhere else. It was a bold strategy. Sin, hiding, confrontation, and then opening the defense by mentioning the wife. An excellent crisis management plan. But blaming Eve was not a small detail in the story. It was a revelation. Sometimes a person's fall is not shown only by the wrong decision. It is shown by the way that person refuses to own the decision afterward. Adam had been present. He had received the fruit. He had eaten it. No one forced his hand. No one moved his jaw. No one secretly replaced his dinner. Yet when the question came, he spoke as though he had mostly been caught standing near someone else's mistake. It was like signing a terrible agreement with another person and then entering the next meeting as if his name had appeared on the page by accident. Adam wanted the facts to remain true while the responsibility became blurry. Yes, he ate, but she gave it to him. Yes, he disobeyed, but God had placed her beside him. That is what makes the answer so revealing. Adam was not denying the event. He was rearranging the moral weight of it. He placed Eve at the front of the sentence and himself at the end, as though responsibility worked by word order. It did not. The sentence was not only an accusation against Eve, it also pushed blame upward. The woman you gave me. Adam was not merely saying, she did this. He was also implying, you put her here. The man who had once welcomed Eve as part of himself now spoke about her as evidence for his defense. That was how far the relationship had already fallen. Adam was not only frightened, he was trying to protect his image in the middle of judgment. And this is where the story becomes more uncomfortable than the usual version. The fruit exposed disobedience, the hiding exposed fear, but the answer exposed Adam. He had a chance to stand in the truth. Instead, he pointed to the person beside him, and blaming Eve did not save Eden. And blaming Eve did not save Eden. It only made the fall more public. Up to that moment, Adam's failure had been seen in what he did, where he hid, and how he answered. Now it was seen in whom he was willing to sacrifice to protect himself. Adam blamed Eve. That was the moment the story stopped being only about a broken command. It became an accusation. The garden had contained no rivalry, no suspicion, and no need for defense. Now, the first conversation after sin already sounded like a courtroom. Adam was not merely explaining the disaster. He was deciding who should stand closest to it when judgment arrived. The first man stood before God, beside the first woman, and pointed. He did not step forward. He did not take full responsibility. He did not say, "She was deceived, but I knew the command." He used the woman beside him as part of his defense. The same woman he had once welcomed with joy. The same woman he had described as bone of his bones and flesh of his flesh. Now, under pressure, She had become evidence. That is what makes the scene so sad and so revealing. Adam had received companionship as a gift. Then, during the crisis, he treated that gift like a disposable shield. Apparently, flesh of my flesh had a very short warranty. The relationship had already changed. The serpent had questioned God's word. Eve had taken the fruit. Adam had eaten. But once the consequences arrived, unity began to collapse. They had entered the decision together. They would not face the confrontation together. It was like two people steering the same boat into a rock, then arguing over who was sitting closer to the wheel while the boat filled with water. Adam's accusation did not make him innocent. It only showed what the fall had done inside him. The man who should have spoken truth now managed blame. The man who had been given responsibility now searched for distance. The man who had shared the act tried to separate himself from the guilt. And that is why the famous answer was not the beginning of Adam's failure. It was the evidence. He had already listened. He had already eaten. He had already hidden. Now the truth simply brought everything into the open. Adam blamed Eve because he wanted the judgment to stop with her. But blame does not work like a locked door. It does not keep consequences on the other side. God questioned Eve too. The serpent was judged. The woman faced consequences, and Adam did as well. His sentence did not disappear because her name appeared first in his answer. His responsibility remained exactly where he had tried to leave it. With him. Adam ate. Adam hid. Adam blamed Eve. And still, Eden was lost. Because pointing at the person beside him could not undo the choice he had made. The blame had moved across the sentence. The consequence had not. The blame had moved across the sentence. The consequence had not. Adam blamed Eve, but blaming her did not give him the garden back. That was the final truth of the story. He had heard the command, he had eaten, he had hidden, he had been confronted, he had pushed the responsibility toward the woman beside him, and he still lost Eden. The excuse changed the conversation, but it did not change the outcome. Adam seemed to want a divided verdict. Perhaps Eve could carry more of the guilt. Perhaps mentioning her first would make his own part appear smaller. Perhaps pointing at the gift would distract from what he had done with it. It did not. God did not leave Eve outside the consequences of her choice. But he did not allow Adam to stand comfortably behind her either. Adam had known the command. Adam had joined the act. Adam had answered for himself. The story refused to let him become an innocent man with an unfortunate wife. That version would have been convenient. It also would have been false. Adam tried to divide responsibility, but he could not divide consequence. It was like signing a terrible contract with someone else, then trying to erase his own signature by pointing at theirs. The ink was still there. So was his choice. The ground would now resist him. Work would become painful. Life outside the garden would be harder, shorter, and marked by death. The entrance to Eden would close behind them. No appeal, no secret path through the trees. No second garden conveniently located nearby. Adam left the place he had been created to tend, and Eve left with him. The man who had blamed her did not remain inside while she walked out alone. He went out too. That is what makes the title complete. Adam blamed Eve, and lost Eden too. His accusation did not restore innocence. It did not rebuild trust. It did not reverse the command. It did not move the consequences away from him. Blame can protect pride for a moment. It can make a person feel less exposed. It can shift attention across the room, but it cannot repair what disobedience has broken. Adam failed twice. First in the act, then in the reaction. He ate when he should not have eaten. Then, when truth stood in front of him, he pointed at someone else. He had tried to turn confession into defense, but the garden gate did not open for explanations, clever wording, or carefully arranged blame. The consequence remained unavoidable, directly in front of him. The tragedy was not only that Adam fell, it was that, after falling, he tried to stand on Eve, and it still did not lift him high enough to remain in Eden. The garden was lost, the relationship was wounded, the excuse failed. Adam blamed Eve, but he walked out of Eden beside her. Which misunderstood Bible story should be simplified next? Cain, Noah, or Samson?